The British before us have lost about 100 years ago. The Soviets before us have lost. But the Americans seem to think it's just going to go on and on and on. George Will recently wrote a piece in Newsweek, and in which he quoted testimony in February of 1966. And this was, at this point, 55,000 Americans out of the 58,200 who died in Vietnam had not died. 55,000 Americans were still alive. And George Kennan, the historian, was asked to testify before Congress about Vietnam. And here's what he said, and I'm quoting the conservative George Will. He said, "There's more respect to be won in the opinion of this world by a resolute and courageous liquidation of unsound positions than by the most stubborn pursuit of extravagant or unpromising objectives. Our country should not be asked, and should not ask of itself, to shoulder the main burden of determining the political realities in any other country, and particularly not one in one remote from our shores, from our culture, and from the experience of our people. It is not only not our business, but I don't think we can do it successfully." Kennan, as I said, spoke those words, and had we said, okay, you're right, let's liquidate the policy, 55,000 Americans would not have died in Vietnam. Frank Gaffney is with us. He is the president and founder of the Center for Security Policy, a former Assistant Secretary of Defense under Ronald Reagan. The website Center for Securitypolicy.org. Frank, welcome to the show.
Hey, Tom.
In a recent op-ed, you said that the Obama policy, the Obama doctrine, was very simple, three-word sentences: undermine our allies, embolden our enemies, diminish our country. This seems to me rather an outrageous way of speaking of our president and not consistent with the facts, and B, your suggestion that we should continue in Afghanistan, I don't get. Please enlighten me here. What am I missing?
On which point? On my characterization of the Obama doctrine, or on Afghanistan, or both?
Well, first of all, undermine our allies, embolden our enemies, and diminish our country. It seems to me that our allies have been strengthened by, I would say, if you wanted to undermine our allies, look at what George Bush did. But our alliances around the world, our strategic alliances around the world, have been strengthened by President Obama. Our enemies have not been emboldened. Many of them seem to be on the run. And diminishing our country? People around the world love our country now as a consequence of the Obama presidency.
Yeah. Well, we're looking at different worlds, I guess. Okay. Tom, is all I can say. From where I sit, we have shaken allies' confidence in us from Eastern Europe to the Far East to Latin America, arguably to the Middle East most especially, in decisions that this administration has taken on missile defense, decisions it's taken vis-a-vis North Korea.
Missile defense that brought about rapprochement with Russia, and you've got some right-wingers in Poland who are unhappy about it.
Yeah, I'm talking about our allies here. We'll get to the enemies in a moment, or the adversaries in a moment. The allies, the Poles and Czechs, are unmistakably distraught over what's been done.
It's not universal in either of those countries, Frank, and you know that.
No, I'm talking about the governments in question, and the alliances are fundamentally about governments and their relations between countries.
Well, even those governments are not monolithic in their...
Not monolithic, because they're democracies, Tom, which is one of the nice things about our allies, is typically they are, but they're not happy, and I think you're kidding yourself if you think otherwise. The point is not simply are they happy or are they not, it's that their confidence in our reliability as the guarantors of their security is being shaken, and it's being shaken.
But what you're saying essentially is that because some folks in the government of Poland and Czechoslovakia are less than happy with us, that counts more than France and Germany being very happy with us now?
Well, if you look at Nicolas Sarkozy, there's a lot of unhappiness on his part about what the president's doing.
I think that there's a certain amount of Obama envy going on with Sarkozy. Certainly,
look, I mean, you can do your psychological profile as you wish. But
well, that's a phrase that was in the International Herald Tribune on Friday.
Well, what the New York Times and others have reported is that both the Prime Minister of Britain and the President of France were seething at the way Obama handled the revelation of this second site, which further undermines the whole idea that we've got our hands around the nuclear program of Iran.
And he got his way. And he got his way.
No, look what he's got so far.
The United States got their way.
Tom, the guy.
Are you unhappy that the United States got their way?
What I'm unhappy about is your anticipation that we've got our way, when what we have had so far is one round of negotiations that is, if history is any guide, the setup for a lot more negotiations and a lot more dissatisfaction. Here's my point, Tom. And you know, we can go back and forth on all of these things, but if I may just respond to your question. In country after country, we have, I think, signaled a greater affinity or greater interest in the attitudes and the preferences and the goodwill of people who are hostile to us than we have people who are our friends, our historic friends and allies. And most especially, I think the cumulative. I know, but we can argue again. We can argue the specific points. But I'm just saying to you why I believe this.
Right, you're describing the trunk. I'm describing the tail of the elephant.
You're going to create.
Let's, if I may, Frank, we just have a couple of minutes left, and we're agreeing that we disagree on this, and I'm not going to try and convince you any further, but Afghanistan.
I won't have the opportunity to convince you any further.
Well, it's going to be a futile exercise, and I really wanted to talk about Afghanistan, and we only have a couple of minutes left.
Let's go.
If Canada invaded the United States, I would take arms against them. And, in fact, Canada did invade the United States. They burned down the White House during the presidency of James Madison, the War of 1812. I don't know if you read this was in the international edition of Newsweek. I was in Europe last week. I don't know if it ran in the U.S. edition, but they interviewed 8 Taliban fighters over a 3-year period. And you get it, that what these guys want, you know, there was like a farmer, a lawyer, a doctor, a taxi driver, and now they're Taliban fighters. And what they want is they want their country. Would you take up arms against Canada if Canada invaded us?
Quite probably.
Okay, then why do you think that our dropping bombs on Afghanistan is in any way going to further their willingness to accept our form of government or our proxy, Karzai or anything else?
Yeah, I'm not sure it will, Tom. But I'm reminded of the guy whose honor you were just defending so vociferously a moment ago, who called this a necessary war, the good war, the war of
Barack Obama.
Have to fight, the very one.
I disagree with him on it.
Well, I
think this is going to be his Vietnam.
I've disagreed with him on a number of things myself, as you've just heard. But I'm just saying to you that the point that we should be discussing, I think, is what really is the agenda of these folks. And I think it's true of the Taliban. I know it's true of Al-Qaeda. It's true of the others who share their adherence to what authoritative Islam calls Sharia. It is not just the liberation of Afghanistan from American occupation, as you would have it. It is they want to liberate the world from the infidels. And that's where we have the ultimate problem.
Yeah. Well, and I guess the question is then, and I don't disagree with you on that, the question is, how do we deal with that problem? Do we deal with it with bombs, or do we deal with it like Greg Mortensen does by building schools and 3 cups of tea? And
it sounds like we're not going to have time to answer that question.
No, we're not.
We'll
leave it in the air. Frank Gaffney, Center for SecurityPolicy.org. Thanks, Frank.
Thank you, Tom.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.